Hi, and welcome to Exceptional History. Before we get into it, please take a moment to like, share, and especially subscribe. A big thanks to everyone who has already done that, as that is what keeps our channel growing and going. As this is our final video on Zvi, we would like to encourage you to check out Elwood McQuaid's book, Zvi, and his documentary, linked below. They have been a great help in our research and give many more details about Zvi's story that we were unable to cover. But for now, sit back, relax, and let's finish off Zvi's story, because this is Exceptional History. How would you like to take special training for a good job? Zvi didn't like the sound of the question his superior officer asked him, but the officer was impressed with his fearless actions in battle and relegated him to dismantling minefields in 1948 Israel. It was prestigious but dangerous work that required Zvi to go under cover of darkness and dismantle Arab mines. In addition to his new job, Zvi began to explore his new home. He asked questions like, what is a Muslim? Why is Jerusalem important? It was a time for discovering his Jewish heritage and also maintaining his habit of getting into trouble. One morning, he woke up very ill. However, he had a young commander who wasn't having it. He wanted Zvi out picking apart mines with nausea and a fever. When Zvi tried to explain his sickness to the commander, the conversation developed into an argument. Sick and annoyed, Zvi picked up a large rock that he intended to throw at the ground, only to make an impression on the commander. Unfortunately, it made its impression on his ankle. Both men were separated, Zvi to the brig and the commander to the infirmary. However, in confinement, it became even more apparent how sick Zvi was. He was taken to the infirmary where, surprise, surprise, who should be sleeping in the bed next to his but his commander. Too tired to care, Zvi fell asleep in the bed with his back turned. When he awoke, he was hungry and was lucky enough to find chocolates in a drawer beside his bed, all of which he polished off. He fell asleep again, but a short while later, he awoke to the sound of his officer chatting with visiting friends. One of them asked what happened to the chocolates they had brought him. Zvi pulled the blankets higher over his face as the officer checked the drawer and found the empty box and scattered wrappers. Enraged, he looked around the ward and demanded to know who the culprit was. Of course, it wasn't hard to see the guilty party when Zvi was the only face hiding under a blanket. You, the officer declared. Knowing he was caught, Zvi twisted over with a sheepish grin. After recovering from his shock, his commander slapped his forehead and said, "Oh no, it is not bad enough for you to break my leg. You have eaten my candy too." Of course, the irony was so funny that the room shook with laughter, the commander included. Thus, a solid friendship between the two was made. However, this was not the end of the troubles Zvi got into. On one occasion, he overstayed a pass and was put in the prison for 3 days. When his friends visited him in the prison courtyard, Zvi announced his intentions to leave. His friends laughed it off, but Zvi insisted he could do it with 1 stick of dynamite. When the dynamite was brought, Zvi set the charge in the prison wall. Since he knew the guards always leaned their guns against a tree in the yard, it was easy for his fellow inmates to remove them without notice. Then, true enough, with 1 stick of dynamite, he blew a hole in the wall, and when the guards looked for their guns, they were nowhere to be found. Zvi and his friends ran back to their camp, and the guards soon came huffing after them. When they requested their prisoners, Zvi's friend the commander came to his aid. The problem no longer was that Zvi had escaped, but that the guards had been unable to stop them because they had allowed their weapons to be stolen. Zvi found himself swapping places with the guards, but when his commander dismissed him, he admonished him with the words, "No more mischief." When the war finally ended, Israel, against all odds, was set on firm grounding as a new, independent state. Their prophetic return had been fulfilled. With the tentative peace, Zvi began to read a Tanakh, or Old Testament, to improve his Hebrew. With the Tanakh, he learned of people he had never heard of, yet were part of his heritage. He best related to a warrior king named David who, despite being close to God, was racked with troubles and conflict. During this time of learning, he ran into a woman who gave him a black book. When he asked what it was, she said, "A New Testament," in Hebrew. Since Zvi didn't know what that was, she explained that it would tell him of Messiah. He didn't know what that was either. They parted ways and he never saw her again, but the book she left with him fascinated him. Since he had already read the Tanakh, he was able to see how it fused into the New Testament. Zvi recounted that this book seemed vibrant and sincere. The people in it were relatable, subject to human emotions like fear. But he was confused by the figure of Jesus. The man seemed perfect, yet people hated and eventually killed him. But then Zvi correlated Jesus with how his own people's treatment had been in the Holocaust. He became completely absorbed in the book until one day a friend informed him that it was not a book for Jews, but fairy tales made up by Christians. Zvi could not understand that since the book had only done him good. But the friend was adamant that he should get rid of the book as soon as possible. Zvi felt more confused than ever. Why would Jews be opposed to a book about a man who was obviously a very good Jew? Maybe even the greatest Jew. Zvi was in a rare position. He was neither steeped in Judaism or Christianity. He had never been confronted with either bias, and therefore had no bias as he read the Hebrew scriptures. However, after so much reading and learning, he came to the point where he felt he should do something about what he had learned. As Zvi's biographer, Elwood McQuaid, writes, as he read the Bible, he came to grips with the matter of his need for righteousness, not merely religious practice. Zvi matched up the animal sacrifices in the Tanakh with Jesus' sacrifice in the New Testament. With his unbiased perspective, he saw the new as an extension of the old, one balancing the other and incomplete without its counterpart. One evening, Zvi ran into a rare thing, a Messianic church dismissing. After speaking with the pastor, he began attending the meetings where he learned that Jesus was seen as the sin-bearer, which relatively lined up with what Zvi had thought, someone to become his righteousness, a sacrifice that could fulfill his need for righteousness, unlike the symbolic animal sacrifices of his ancient ancestors. Finally, he concluded that he needed to be what Christian jargon describes as saved. When he asked his pastor about it, his pastor was initially hesitant. He explained that this was a serious and irreversible decision that he needed to fully understand. The pastor said, "If you accept Jesus as your Messiah and Savior, you will be in for trouble." The pastor reminded him that Christian Jews were in a tight place, unable to live their religion openly and suffering under the hand of their own countrymen if they did. For this reason, you must be very sure that this is your decision and not one that you have been talked into by me or anyone else. But Zvi already had a clear picture of what he was getting into. He understood suffering, and he knew that the Messiah had suffered much more for him. "It will be a privilege to suffer for him," he responded. And then the transaction was made, Zvi's will, heart, and destiny given to the Messiah. Zvi recalled that in return, his void of loneliness disappeared and his life was crystallized into joy and peace. His past no longer defined him, and he truly had a new future awaiting him. Shortly after, Zvi's friends noticed how happy he was, though he said nothing. Many theories floated around, but the prominent theory was, "I bet he won the lottery." When they asked Zvi what had happened, he said, "Before I was a Jew with an empty life. Today I am a Jew who has found peace." Soon after Zvi's change, a Jewish girl named Esther drifted her dark eyes in his direction. Unable to resist, Zvi invited her to a messianic meeting where she too made a transaction with the Messiah. As with his own transaction, Zvi made sure to make no effort to push her. When he asked her to marry him, he reminded her that being with a Christian Jew would be dangerous. Esther reminded him that she was not a child and certainly knew what she was getting herself into. Shortly, they were before a rabbi and wedded. They remained together long enough to see Israel survive more attacks and become the home for their children and grandchildren. Of course, as Christian Jews, they had many interesting encounters and more adventures. Some happy, some sad. They were not parted until 2014, when Zvi passed away, leaving behind the homeland and family he fought so hard to protect. However, as most Christians will tell you, Zvi's death was not the end of his adventures. I hope you liked that video. If you did, you know the drill. Please like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell, and leave us a comment to let us know if you liked this, if you didn't like it, what you thought about it, and we will see you in our next video.